for the March Procreate tutorial, we will be walking through this really fun, artsy, abstract-ish inspired piece. It reminds me of when I used to do art journaling and you use a lot of different mixed media. It's really loose. It has a lot of scribbles. It's just really fun and easy. There's a lot of layering involved. And one thing that a lot of you have asked me for is to do more tutorials using my current Procreate brush sets instead of creating any new ones. And that works well this year because it's a moving year for us with the military, so I don't have quite as much time to develop new products. So this one will largely use 2 brush sets. We'll be using my creativity kit, a ton from that one, and then a few things from the watercolor lettering kit. So those watercolor hearts, the paper textures, are the main things, and then the splatters are also from the watercoloring kit. Everything else is from the creativity kit. And I just wanted to show you quickly here. If I go to my photos, that's our template for today. But the creativity kit was this one. So a lot of you already have that one. It's one of my more popular sets. And the brushes, these are one of my favorite sets I've ever created because everything has so much texture. So we'll be using a variety of those, and it will really be up to you which ones you use, as that will make more sense as we get into the tutorial. But then we'll also be using a lot of the stamps, which come as stamps and also liner brushes. So I'll kind of demo those as we go through the tutorial. On the blog, as usual, you can get a reference sheet you can download. This time I also included my layers panel because certain things need to go in certain places to look right for this piece. The basic color palette is just kind of a rainbow pastel springy inspired. You don't have to use these exact colors, and we'll be using a lot of variations of each color for the layering. But I wanted to have it there in case you wanted to use it. If you have done some of my past tutorials, these are the same colors from, say, like the Awake-ish tutorial. And one last thing before we get started, I wanted to just show you the process video and talk to you about a few things as we go through that. So if I come up here and I click video, I can replay the time lapse. So you can see I just kind of started out sketching, and I was kind of playing here to see what I thought worked best with different brushes, all from the creativity kit, and layering things, laying different colors. And then I'm playing with all the different brush styles down here. I ended up using most of them. Then I used the grid stamps from, I think this was in my Quinn lettering set, and then a big square brush to do the basic letters, and then we'll go through tracing them together. So that'll be our first step, and then we'll start to layer a ton of colors with different brushes, lots of textures. And now we're gonna add some sketching. Get really sketchy, and then we'll add stamps and scribbles and just fun little elements to kind of really create that artsy, fun style. So I'll let this keep playing out for just a moment. You can see, even though we try to be loose and not think too much about this style, I still change things and think about balance and balancing not only my scribbles and stamps, but also my colors. So I had a ton of fun with this piece. I think I'll do a lot more in this style going forward, so I hope you enjoy it just as much as well. First thing we want to do is tap our plus sign and open a new square canvas. I have several here. I'm going to go ahead and do my 2000 by 2000 that's set at 300 DPI. And now we want to bring in our lettering template. So that was on the blog for you to download. It is a JPEG format. So I'm just going to tap my wrench icon here, click add, click insert a photo. You should have saved the photo to your iPad, and then I'll just open it up and it fits right on that square. So now I'm going to rename this layer sketch just to keep myself organized, and I'll tap the N, reduce the opacity a bit, and add a new layer and rename this lettering. This is going to be my main spring lettering, and the brush you're going to want to use for this one from the creativity kit is the felt fine liner, and that is because let me make this bigger, it has textured edges, so that'll look nice and artsy when we get through. So I am going to do this part off screen. I'll have you pause here and go through this because in a lot of my past videos I have taught you how to draw letters, but just a reminder before you get started, if you put your pen down, your Apple Pencil to the page and hold it, you can get that nice straight line. You can also draw an arc and hold it and get a more perfect arc. So you're just gonna go around tracing each letter. And again, this is gonna be super artsy, so it does not have to be perfect. You can, you know, have an arc stop there and then kind of pick up going through each letter. I'm gonna finish one letter just for anyone who's super new to this and has not watched any of my past videos. So I just go around tracing each letter until it's done. We can sometimes draw a nice big arc. And then, so I got my S done, and now I'll drag and drop my color, and then you can see a little better anywhere that you might need to touch up or erase. But again, with as artsy as this piece is gonna be, imperfect is totally fine. Now you're gonna go through and do all of the letters of spring, and it's okay to keep them on one layer for the purposes of what we're doing today. A lot of times I'll have you do each thing on its own layer. Today's tutorial, we're gonna keep it all on one layer, which keeps it nice and simple. So pause the video, get everything traced, and then we'll come back and start adding the really fun details. So now we have our spring lettering complete, and let's tap your sketch layer. You can actually turn that off, add a new layer, and rename this paper. This is gonna be our watercolor paper texture background. So for that, from the watercolor kit, you can pick any one of these watercolor papers you want. Oh, there's my grid stamp I was talking about that I used when I created the letters. So I'm gonna go with the medium. And when I do watercolor paper, I usually just pick kind of a mid-range gray color. I'm gonna go with that one. And then the key to using textures is once your pen is on the page, don't lift it up until your whole page is colored. So now you've got this great watercolor paper texture. And we want to change the color of our lettering using the color palette we talked about. So basically it's kind of a pink, peach, yellow, greeny, teal, a blue, and a purple. So I'm just gonna drag and drop to do that. So I'll do pink, and then a peachy color, yellow. So this was my Awake-ish coloring palette. If you did that tutorial, that is free on my blog. That was a download. So you can always go to that post on my blog and download that color palette. We'll fill that a few times. Because of the felt fine liner has opacity in the way I drew it, it shows through, but we're gonna color over it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Then I'm gonna pick that kind of purpley blue color and then purple. Now we're gonna make it fun and artsy. So our next layer here, go ahead and tap a new layer, rename this, let's call it artsy. I think I called it artsy textures in the first one. So we want this, I've shown you this in past videos, but pick a slightly different color pink than what you used. It can be either slightly lighter or slightly darker, and then pick one of these brushes from the creativity kit, any one you want to start. And you're just gonna kind of color scribbles really loosely over. You can get a little on the next one and just take all different shades of pink and various brushes. So I might do the rough edges, which has a really fun texture, and I'm just gonna keep changing pinky colors, whoop, and going over the edges and layering multiple times. So what we need to do though, so this confines itself to the letters that we've drawn, is just tap our layer and click clipping mask. So now everything is confined to our letters, and it's a little easier to see what you're doing. So I'm just gonna go through this piece, changing brushes, changing colors, and just really layering it up, letting a little go on the next letter when I think it makes sense. And again, you don't want to be too precise with this. You can be really loose, you can play. The alcohol ink marker does some really fun things. Ooh, I need to change the color though. I'll do like a lighter. You can see that and I can go back a little on that one. So that's why we had all our letters on the same color, so we can kind of go back over. And so you're just gonna keep switching between brushes, That gives you a nice kind of texture. If you play with the sizes of the brushes, at a smaller size, it's more opaque. And then at a really large size, you get that nice texture, especially if you just kind of stamp it. And then I'd make it smaller, add some scribbles. So I'm gonna go through and do that, whoop, until I cover all my letters. So for green, I'll use lighter shades of dark and green. For yellow, I'll use various shades of yellow, of course, until it's all complete. And the thing is, you know, every time you do this, it will come out different. So when I finish this one, it'll look really different than this one. So if I kind of toggle everything off that I added, you can see what this looked like when I was on that initial just coloring stage that we're doing now. And then as you add all these other elements, it really comes together as a fun, cohesive piece. So don't worry too much about this step, just have fun with it. I'm gonna let you pause again here, speed up the video while I do this step, and then we will pick up with doing some of the sketchy stuff and the stamping. Everything is now painted and quite artsy, but we're gonna take it up a notch by adding a new layer. And let's rename this our Sketchy Outline. And this step was inspired by a class I took by Megan at Makewell. So if you, she does these amazing florals, and so be sure to check her out. I took her class on her funky florals, and it's a super great one. You should totally go take it. I'll make sure to link it in the video, in the blog post. So Sketchy Outline, we're gonna go back to our felt fine liner, and we want it to be pretty small. Let's test that out. Maybe a little smaller. So I'm at about 7% here, and that's pretty good. And so now we are just gonna very loosely sketch each letter. So I wanna keep it kind of close, but not dead on. So I'm gonna do that for each letter at least 3 times. And you can change up the color if I wanna make one a little darker or one a little lighter. Maybe I'll do a lighter one for the last one. So at least 3 times, but if you wanna do more, you can. So you're gonna go through and do that for every single letter. So I did my S, I ended up doing 4, I think, on that one. That one's a little too close. You don't want it to be perfect. We want it to look sketchy. So when it overlaps the letter or goes off the letter, it actually looks better. I think I needed slightly darker color to really make it stand out. So since I did 4 layers on the S, I'm gonna make sure I do 4 layers for each of these. So again, pause the video here so you can go through and do that on every single letter, and I will do it and speed it up, and then we'll come back and start adding some more layers of textures. We've got all our sketching done. So we've got these nice sketchy layers around each letter. And you can see I pulled my project reference sheet over so I can kind of refer to it as we move along from here. So go to your paper layer, add a new layer above that, and let's rename that Background Scribbles. Okay, and now we're just gonna go back to taking various brushes and kind of doing some scribbles. So I'm gonna start with this alcohol ink one. You can pick whichever one you want. And here's where I'm gonna think more about balancing out the colors. So I'm gonna just make a little scribble of the blue down there. And then you can use your color picker tool to kind of go back to colors you've used. So that's just this little square here. And it makes it quick to grab other colors. And I'm gonna use a different brush for each scribble, just so I have some like really nice texture. So I wanna go a slightly lighter pink there. And I might increase the size, really get that fun texture in there, maybe make it a little looser. And then I'm gonna use a teal color down here, and maybe this soft pastel brush, and I'm gonna come from a different angle so it's not too perfect or consistent. And I'm just gonna do a lot of things in groups of odd numbers because visually that ends up looking best. And I might even for that one, I'm gonna layer it with another, let's do chalk. I'm just gonna add another, maybe smaller element there. Okay, so let's go ahead now. Actually, I'll start a new video. That way I can make chapters on the bottom of the video so you can skip to certain segments. If you feel like your background scribbles are too bold, you can always reduce the opacity here by tapping the N on that layer, so that little N right there, and making them a little lighter. I think I'm gonna take mine down to about 70% or so. And I'm gonna add a new layer above that, and we're gonna call this background hearts. You can use any hearts. I have a lot of heart stamps in my brush kits because I'm a shameless overuser of hearts in my work. So there's some textured hearts down here, but I use the watercolor one because I really liked the look of that in the background. So we're on our background hearts layer. That's way too big. So I'm gonna reduce the size, and you see that's got that built-in watercolor texture, especially if I duplicate it and make it a little deeper, but I'll do that after I have all my hearts placed. So I'll do one there and kind of put it in the middle of those two. And then I'm gonna do a nice bold pink one, and I might make that one a little bigger. And I'll put, if I wanna move that one, since it's on the same layer as the other heart, all I need to do is kind of grab it there. I want it big enough that it can kind of poke out behind the eye. And then I'll do a yellow one. And I will circle that with my magic wand tool. I'm gonna make it a little smaller and have that one peek out a little there. So now I've got 3 hearts again. And like I said, if you want them to be bolder, all you need to do is swipe left and click duplicate, and you can see how much bolder they become. So I'm gonna do that so it's a little bolder, but I don't want it quite so bold. So then I'll reduce the opacity again to around 70%. So that is our background hearts. And next we will add some scribbles on our top of that. So scroll up to your top layer, your sketchy outline layer. And now we're gonna add another layer above that, and let's rename it Scribbles. And for this one, you can use any of the Creativity Kit brushes that you like. I'm gonna start with just the felt fine liner, and I'm gonna make it really fine. I'm also gonna grab like a almost black color. Oops, right there. Let me test that out. That's pretty good. I'm at like 5% right here. So I'm gonna make a little scribble there, maybe a little one here. You know what, maybe I wanna go even a little finer. So I'm gonna 2-finger tap to undo and test out a 3% brush size. Yeah, I'm gonna go a little smaller. And I'll do a little scribble there, and a little scribble there. And again, you can place these kind of wherever you think makes sense. And then I also did a couple little curly cues. So I did one there, and I did one down here, and then one about there. And then I did a couple like crosshatch things on my hearts. I do that a lot in pieces, whether it's like a star or a heart. I like to add little details to that. Let's see. I think that's pretty good for now. Actually, let's do some white too. So I'm gonna grab white, and I'll do a few there. And it's okay if it overlaps other things. If you don't necessarily want it to overlap your black and you wanna have more control over it, you could add a new layer and call one Scribbles white and one Scribbles black. So I'll do that. I did not do that in the first one, but in this instance, I think I would prefer to do that. So I'll add a few cross hatches here, and then just do some like really loose scribbles, and maybe a little here, a little there. And that's it for now. If I need to come back to it and add some more to balance it out, I will later. So I'm gonna rename that one too, just so I have it more organized. So Scribbles Black. Ooh. And next we'll add some stamps and splatters and one more lettering detail and a few little hearts, and we will be all done. So add a new layer at the top again, and we'll call this one Stamps. Can you hear my dog sauntering into the room? All my kids and dogs are here today, so it's always a gamble when I start filming whether you're gonna hear them in the background or not. All right, I'm gonna use this heart stamp too with all that texture. And I'm gonna make it a little smaller, do 2 there and 1 there. And again, this is one of those instances where I might duplicate it to make it a little bolder and then merge down. If I wanna adjust the angle of the heart, I can use this ribbon tool and I can maybe resize it a little. So I've got 3 heart stamps there. And then you can see there's stamped plus. That's just a stamp, so you can stamp like that and like have a little more control over it. Or if you want it to be really random, you can use the border brush and it's really fast. You can just change the size and draw some there. You can even stamp it to add 1 more if you want to. And then I am going to grab the manual version of this, so the Stamp Plus, and I want to go back to that almost black color, and I'm just going to make it smaller, some stamps in this corner, just really random, and I'm going to do the circle border brush and do a few, way too big. A couple there, maybe that's too many even. I'm gonna stamp it instead so I have a little more control. So I just kind of go through and play with this, and I add a bunch of different things. And then I'll actually do a few colored stamps too. So I'm gonna use this textured, let's do that really textured dot. And I'm gonna go back to a teal color, actually blue. And I'll do 3 dots there. I might make that a little smaller. 3 there, and then I'll grab a yellow color and do 3 there. I'm also gonna add, I really like this Stamped Plus. It looks really abstract, so I'm gonna do a bunch there. And I'm gonna make some big and then some smaller. And I think I wanna change the direction of those so they're more that way. You can do that 2 ways. You can do it there. You can also, if you ever have trouble with a brush, if you come down to shape, you can change the direction. Sometimes your canvas gets flipped around, and if your stamps are ever going the wrong way, you just need to come into that shape option and adjust it. So sometimes I'll move that and then I'll move it back later. All right, so I think that's pretty good for all our stamping. And now we'll add a few more small hearts. So let's go ahead, we can stay on the stamp layer actually. And I'm gonna use this small heart, and I'm gonna place 3 of those. So I'll do a blue one there. Again, if your stamp is funky, you can manually circle it, or you can change it in the option I showed you a second ago. I'll do that one kind of there, and then a pink one over here. So again, if I want to change the direction of that stamp, I must have got my canvas turned around at some point. All I have to do is come to that shape option and do that. So now it looks like my stamp is sideways, but it will stamp upright, or it depends on what, direction you put this on. But that's just because I got my canvas, don't want to do that, canvas flipped around at some point. So I'm going to leave it upright so that it works next time I'm in, and then just manually change it. All right, and then one more stamp I will do in yellow so that it looks like it's kind of coming off this curly Q down here. Again, this was all just random things I decided to do. You can get creative and put things wherever you think looks good. Maybe try doing this with your name or a friend's name. And let's see. So we've got our stamps. Now we need to do some splatters. So add one more new layer, and we're gonna call this Splatters. And we're gonna go to the watercolor kit, and there's two kinds of splatters. There's some saturated and some subtle. So I'm gonna use a few of both. I'm gonna start with the saturated, and I like to kind of make sure that the colors make sense where I'm throwing them. So off the hearts, I kind of like when the same color comes off of it. But again, this is totally up to you where you wanna place. And I don't like to overdo it with splatters. So just kind of a few off each thing. You can change the size. You can make it a lot bigger, a lot smaller if you want it to be more subtle. I think you can get overkill with splatters really easy, so don't overdo it. And so now I'm gonna switch to subtle, and this one is a lot more light. So you wanna pick a slightly darker color and it'll show up better. So you can see that there, and I'll just tap a few of those in as well. Wherever I think, like, kind of look at the piece and see where I think it needs balanced out, and that's where I will add some splatters. I might do one more saturated right here by this P, and that looks pretty good. So you can keep adding as many or as little as you would like, but again, try not to overdo it. All right, I think that's it for splatters. So we have two final steps and we will be all done with this piece. I want my letters to have some of that paper texture on top too. So there's a really easy way to do that. We are going to swipe left on our paper layer, duplicate it, and bring it right above those artsy textures. And a clipping mask should automatically apply. So that will keep it to our letters. But what looks really nice when you're using watercolor is to go down, tap your N, and go from normal to add, and it really brightens it up. And then I usually reduce the opacity just a bit, but watch if I come over here and I toggle, oop, I accidentally drew on it. Okay, so if I toggle it on and off, see how it adds the texture? Let me zoom in even more too. So there's no paper texture over it right now. And if I add it, we get that nice paper texture, which makes it look far more realistic and was really easy. So when I got to the end of this piece, I decided something needed to be right here. So all I did was I went back to my felt fine liner in the almost black color on a really skinny brush. I added a new layer up here, and I just made it say hello spring, and that was solely to balance out. So you can see right there, I added it. So you could draw it in whatever style you wanted. I decided to do kind of a flourishy monoline style. And you can 2-finger tap to undo. Again, you want it to look artsy and not too perfect, so kind of scribbly. So don't worry about it being too perfect. And then because I have it on its own layer, I can adjust it. And sometimes what I'll do is I will put it in and kind of rough sketch it out. And then I will make it a smaller or a lower opacity and add a new layer on top, and then go more slowly to make it look slightly more refined and finalize it, especially because I think this E needs to be more like there. Kind of smooth out my L's a little bit. Go more slowly. And then I'll delete my original layer and then rename the final one hello. And then I can move it into position. And now we're really done with our piece. Sometimes I'll go back and play with my background elements and see if I want to lighten them just a bit. Sometimes I'll transfer it to my computer too and see how it shows up on screen. So I know when I post to Instagram, like, oh, that's way too bright in the background, I'll reduce it. But because we have it on so many layers, it's really easy to edit. You can delete it out and redo that layer if you don't end up happy with it. But that is it for this piece. And I hope you had so much fun. Like right now, I'm actually looking at that heart and thinking, oh, that looks way too big. So I can go back to my stamp layer, use my ribbon tool, and just shrink it down a wee bit. So that is it for our sketchy, artsy inspired lettering piece. And I think you could do so many different fun styles and designs with this. You could even have a colored background. You could do it on black paper with more white elements for the scribbles and things like that. So I would love to see what you created. As usual, tag me on Instagram at byjohnnicole, and I will see you again next month for a new lettering style tutorial in Procreate.